You don't need more balance, you need the right rhythms. Much like a heart where all four chambers must work together, real success depends on four key rhythms working in harmony. It spells rest: relational, emotional, spiritual, and tangible rhythms. I'm your host, Kent Murawski. Welcome to the Rhythms of Rest Leadership Podcast, where we build the rhythms for sustainable success, the kind that doesn't cost you your soul. Let's go. Well, the worst advice you can give to anyone who thrives on forward motion is, hey, just rest. See, for leaders, this is the number one misconception, and it's this: thinking rest means doing nothing. If you don't believe me, what's the immediate picture that comes to mind when you hear the word rest? I'll give you a second to think about it. Did you think about it? Is it maybe couch, bed, hammock, binging on Netflix in your pajamas? You fill in the blank. You know, doing nothing isn't bad, and it works for a few hours, but then you're left scratching your head wondering what to do next. Leaders tell me all the time, they say, I don't know how to rest. And that's because the term rest is too misunderstood and too vague. So if rest doesn't mean doing nothing, what does it actually mean? Let me take you back thousands of years to find out. Here's where things get interesting. And hang with me if you're not religious. It's okay. There's a point that's relevant to you whether you're religious or not. So at the end of the creation narrative in the Hebrew Torah, in the book of narrative, it's around Genesis chapter 2, there's an odd statement, and it simply says that God rested. After he finished his work of creation, it says that God rested. And that word rest doesn't mean what we think in English. Here's what it means. It means to cease, to stop, to celebrate. So follow me for a minute. Track with me on this. When God finished his work, he declared it was very good, and he stopped to enjoy what he had accomplished. So here's the intriguing question. Whether you're religious or not, it brings up something fascinating. If, as the Bible describes, that God, the creator of the universe, took time to stop and celebrate for a whole day and the world didn't fall apart, then why can't we? I want you to let that land for just a moment. If God rested, why can't we? See, this changes everything that we think we know about rest, and we need a new definition of rest. So the number one mistake that I hear leaders making is, when it comes to rest, is that they equate rest with inactivity, when in fact, rest is often very active. So the new definition is, more often than not, rest is not doing nothing, it's doing what replenishes you. Rabbi and philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote in his book and famously said, if you work with your mind, Sabbath with your hands. If you work with your hands, Sabbath with your mind. There's a real genius to that philosophy, isn't there? Because it's about engaging different parts of yourself. So when we think about rest, we need to think about it differently. Let me just share a personal story with you. Several years ago, probably going on 10 or so years ago now, maybe more, I was having a difficult season of leadership. There was a leadership conflict in the organization I was leading. It was with a young man that I had mentored and put a lot of time into, and we were having a disagreement about one of the major tenets of one of the major values that we held as an organization. And there was lots of time for discussion and talking about it. In fact, we took almost a year to just really hash through this. We didn't want to rush it. We didn't want to jump to conclusions. But at the end of that, I was very emotionally depleted. The leader, though he didn't have to, ended up stepping down, and though he didn't have to, leaving the organization eventually. And it was just exhausting and depleting and heartbreaking. But in that season, I remember just feeling, I felt stretched thin. I felt like I knew I was emotionally depleted, but I just couldn't figure out how to replenish. And so I just do what a lot of men do. I just retreated to the garage, and I started picking up some, taking some furniture in my house and refinishing it. I ended up, I think, refinishing almost every object of furniture in my house. My grandma's little jewelry thing that sat on my dresser, our kitchen table, the radiator covers. I picked up some on the street that I found somebody threw out, and I refinished those. An entertainment center. I just did everything. And you know what happened? Working with my hands didn't require emotional capacity, but it helped me to heal. And that's when something clicked for me. I realized that depletion doesn't get fixed by doing nothing. It gets fixed by doing things that replenish you. And usually that involves fun and hobbies. So I have some, other, things that I use to actively rest, things like playing music, taking walks, hiking, skiing, golfing, biking. On the weekends, on my day of rest, I read fiction and poetry instead of business books and productivity books. And, this is really a thing. I call it puttering in the garage. It's like when you just clean up the garage or you find a project to do out there or in the basement. Working with my hands, family time. The thing is about all those things is they're not doing nothing, but they all actively replenish me. And you probably have your own things. I don't know what they are. And you need to think about what those are. What are those activities that actively replenish you, but they're not work-related? Well, let me tell you about Brandon's 400% transformation. Brandon is a tutoring company founder, an education company. And when I met him and started coaching him, he literally couldn't hold a thought in his mind walking from one room to the next. His mind was so foggy. It was so, just overwhelmed and confused that he just couldn't even remember a thought that he just had. And so he was burned out. He was frustrated. He was angry. And he actually hadn't, I remember asking him, Brandon, when's the last time you took a day off? And he actually hadn't taken a day off that he could remember in 5 or 6 years because he just felt like if I do, I'm going to get buried and I won't be able to catch up. So when I introduced him to this concept of rest or of Sabbath, he was skeptical. But when I explained the Jewish Sabbath, and again, track with me for a minute, it's 24 hours of complete rest that starts at sundown on a Friday night and goes till sundown on Saturday night. Now, it doesn't really matter which day it is. That's just how it traditionally has been practiced. But Brandon was skeptical at first, but when he learned that it started at sundown and went till sundown the next day, he felt like, okay, so I could actually do some work Saturday night, you're saying, if I took this day of rest? I said, yeah, why don't you just start with 12 hours? He said, no, I think I can do the full 24 as long as I have some time to kind of re-engage on Saturday night so I don't get buried. Well, he did that, and suddenly things began to click. So before this, now within a few months, he went from working 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, to working 2 to 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. I want to repeat that because that's profound. And I don't want to overassume either. There were other things happening. There were other things he put into place. But this concept of a 24-hour day of rest every week was the catalyst for a lot of other things. And so I want to say that again. He went from 12 to 15 hours, 7 days a week working in his business, to 2 to 4 hours per day, 6 days a week working in his business. It was a game changer. His demeanor completely changed. He was no longer, after a few months, frustrated and frazzled and angry. I want to do the math with you for a minute. That's nearly a 400% decrease in hours worked per week. Now, maybe you're like, Ken, I don't want to work 2 to 4 hours a day in my business. Well, you don't have to. That's not the point. That's what it led Brandon to. And after he did that, in the months following, just caught up with him recently, he had the time to do all the things that he'd wanted to do, but just had been putting off for years. He started a podcast. He wrote a book. And he, there was things that were on his heart to do that he just never had the time to do. But Sabbath, that day of rest, was the catalyst. And I wonder for you, could a real day of rest become a catalyst for you too? Here's the challenge for you leaders. The do-nothing approach doesn't work well for high-capacity people. Because here's why. You often love your work. You love personal development, productivity. You want to get stuff done. You love creative problem solving and creating things and making things better. And the problem with doing nothing is it can feel like torture, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. Because we find ourselves sneaking in the behaviors. We're opening up our phone to check the email or peeking at our computer or doing other work-related tasks when we're supposed to be resting. Or, I know that happens with me sometimes as well. I'm not perfect, but I want to reframe our approach to rest, because instead of doing nothing on a day of rest or even after work when you're kind of weary, why not try doing something that replenishes you? And here's why it gets even more nuanced. Because rest isn't one-dimensional. There is actually 4 different types of depletion, and at least 4 types, and they each need different solutions. So there's 4 rhythms that we talk about on this show that we call rhythms of rest. So different types of depletion require different types of rest. And this is all about the 4 rhythms, the framework rhythms of rest, because rest isn't one-dimensional. And if you don't audit, what type of depletion and think about what you're actually experiencing, you're going to keep resting wrong and wondering why you still feel burned out. So let me break down each rhythm with its specific need for you. First, the R in the word rest is relational rhythms. For example, if you're depleted relationally, probably what you need, not always, but probably is deep connection, where you can just let your hair down and be you with someone you really trust. What you don't need is isolation, but sometimes because we're dealing with maybe some relationships that are toxic, we think we need isolation, and you may need a bit of that, but we really need relational, deep connection with people we trust. If you're emotionally drained, what you need is fun and hobbies oftentimes, not more productivity, because emotional depletion it's one of those ones, it's probably the hardest to understand how to replenish, and I found that fun and hobbies kind of tend to do the trick many times. If your spiritual rhythms are dry, and please understand what I mean by that, that could be faith or that could be a robust philosophy of life. But what you need if you feel dry is purpose and beauty. What you don't need is another task to do. And then tangible rhythms. What do I mean by that? Tangible as in your outputs and your physical, the physical things in your life. Your eat, your sleep, your exercise, your work, and your finances. So if you're feeling exhausted physically, you might need movement, you might need sleep, more sleep, you might need better nourishment, but what you don't need is another deadline. And so those are the 4 rhythms of rest, because one type of rest doesn't fix all 4, okay? But if you identify which rhythm needs replenishment and give it what it actually needs, you'll stop running on fumes and you're going to start living and operating from overflow. All right. Well, I told you every week that we're going to have a rhythms check at the end of this. So here's your rhythms check for this week. And I want you to actually do this, not just think about it, okay? It's a simple step. It's going to take you can do it right when you're done with this podcast, but definitely in the next 24 hours or so. Ask yourself this question. Which of the 4 rhythms, relational, emotional, spiritual, or tangible, feels most deeply depleted right now? Don't overthink it. Your gut knows. Then I want you to do one thing this week that specifically replenishes that rhythm. Not the rhythm that's the easiest to fix necessarily, unless you really feel like you need to start there. Not the one you always default to, but the one that needs it most. Here's a reflection question for us this week. Imagine taking a full day to do only what replenishes you. No productivity, no checking email, no sneaking work. What would you actually do on that day? I want you to just list 3 activities without overthinking it right now. So if you've got them in your mind, now ask yourself, when's the last time you did any of them? And be honest. Well, here's what I want you to do. If you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment below and tell me which rhythm is most depleted for you right now. Is it the relational? Is it the emotional? Is it the spiritual? Is it the tangible? And what's one thing you're going to do this week to replenish it? If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whichever platform you use, pull out your phone right now, and just respond to me, DM me something at Instagram at Kent Murawski or on LinkedIn. Let's build some accountability together. And I want to end with this. If you haven't taken the Rhythms of Rest assessment yet, do it this week. It takes only about 5 minutes, and it'll show you exactly where you fall on the burnout scale from thriving to critical and which of the 4 rhythms needs your attention most right now. You can find that at kentmurawski.com, and that's called the Rhythms of Rest assessment. Well, until next time, I want you to remember, sustainable success doesn't cost you your soul. And rest, it's not about doing nothing. It's about doing what brings you back to life. I'm Kent Murawski, and thanks for listening to the Rhythms of Rest Leadership Podcast. If this resonated with you, you'll love my bi-weekly newsletter. Every other week I send out honest, practical insights to help you live and lead from rest instead of burnout. No fluff, just simple tools from my Rhythms of Rest framework to help you slow down without losing momentum. Just go to kentmurawski.com/newsletter and sign up. It's absolutely free, and you'll be the first one to hear about exclusive offers and get bonus content. Have a great week.